day my daughter Tegan proved a billionaire wrong wasn't just about fixing a car. It was about watching my little girl become the woman I always knew she could be. I'm Rick Caldwell, and I've been running Caldwell's Auto Repair here in suburban Denver for 20 years. 20 years of oil changes, brake jobs, and keeping folks' cars running so they can get to work, pick up their kids, live their lives. But nothing in those 2 decades prepared me for what happened when a red Lamborghini Huracan pulled into my shop with smoke pouring from under the hood. The woman who stepped out wore a designer dress that probably cost more than most people make in 6 months. Viviana Ashworth. I'd seen her face in business magazines at the dentist's office. Tech heiress, worth billions. And by the look on her face when she surveyed my humble garage, she was not impressed. She had this way of looking at everything like it was beneath her, especially the 19-year-old girl in coveralls who was bent over the engine of a pickup truck in the corner. That girl was my daughter Tegan. She'd been my shadow in this garage since she could barely walk, learning to identify engine problems by sound before other kids her age could tie their shoes. She was brilliant with anything mechanical, but she'd never worked on anything like what just rolled through our bay doors. Neither had I, honestly. A Lamborghini Huracan represents everything we weren't. Expensive, exclusive, foreign to our world of practical repairs and honest work. But here's what that heiress didn't know about my daughter. Tegan had just been accepted to the Colorado School of Mines for automotive engineering. She'd been torn up about it for weeks, feeling guilty about leaving me to handle the shop alone, worried about the cost, questioning whether she was smart enough to compete with kids from wealthy families. She needed something to prove to herself that she belonged anywhere she wanted to be. As I watched Tegan slowly straighten up from that pickup truck, wiping her hands on a rag, I had no idea that in the next few minutes, my shy, self-doubting daughter would make a decision that would change both our lives forever. I had no idea that this woman who clearly thought we were beneath her notice was about to give Tegan exactly the challenge she needed. And I definitely had no idea that within 24 hours, half of Denver would be talking about what happened in our little garage. What I did know was that my wife Sarah used to say Tegan had magic in her hands when it came to engines. Sarah died when Tegan was just a baby, but she always believed our daughter would do something extraordinary someday. As that Lamborghini's engine knocked and wheezed in our bay, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment Sarah had been talking about. The moment when everything we'd taught Tegan about. Let me tell you about the morning everything changed. It was a Tuesday in late March, and Denver was doing that thing it does in spring where it can't decide if it wants to snow or shine. Tegan had been up since 5:30, same as every day, getting ready for her morning classes at Front Range Community College before coming to help me at the shop. She'd been quieter than usual for weeks, and I knew why. The acceptance letter from Colorado School of Mines sat on our kitchen table like a loaded gun. Full ride scholarship for automotive engineering, starting in the fall. It was everything we'd worked towards since she was 12 years old and could diagnose a transmission problem just by listening to how a car shifted gears. But taking it meant leaving me alone with a business that was barely keeping us afloat. I quote, built Caldwell's Auto Repair from nothing after Sarah died. Started with just me, a bay I rented from old Pete Morrison, and a toolbox I'd bought with Sarah's life insurance money. Back then, Tegan would sleep in a playpen in the corner while I worked on cars, and by the time she was walking, she was handing me wrenches. By 10, she could change oil faster than most of my part-time guys. By 15, she was rebuilding engines that other shops had given up on. The problem was, she didn't believe in herself the way I believed in her. Put her in front of a professor or anyone in a suit, and she'd clam up, convinced they'd see right through her to the grease under her fingernails in the small-town garage where she learned everything she knew. She'd grown up hearing customers make comments about how cute it was that Rick's little girl wanted to play mechanic, never realizing they were talking to someone who understood internal combustion better than most people with engineering degrees. Our shop sits on the edge of what used to be the working-class part of Littleton, but these days the fancy developments keep creeping closer. Every month, another independent garage closes down, unable to compete with the dealerships and their computerized diagnostic equipment. We survived because I'd built a reputation for honesty. When Mrs. Patterson brought in her Honda, and I told her she didn't need a new transmission, just a $50 sensor. She remembered that. When Miguel's work truck broke down and I let him pay me $20 a week until it was settled, he sent his whole crew my way. But honest doesn't always pay the bills. The shop's mortgage payment kept going up while our customer base slowly moved to newer places with shinier waiting rooms and free coffee. I'd been losing sleep for months, running numbers that never seemed to add up right, wondering if I'd failed. Not just myself, but Tegan too. Maybe she'd be better off getting as far away from this place as possible, making something bigger of herself than I ever could. That morning, she'd come in around noon after her physics class, and I could see the weight of that decision pressing down on her shoulders. She loved this place, loved working with her hands, loved the satisfaction of fixing something that was broken. But she also knew the world expected more from someone with her brains. The scholarship was her ticket to respectability, to a career where people would take her seriously from day one. We were both stuck, afraid to hold the other one back, afraid to let go of what we'd built together. The shop felt different lately, like we were both just waiting for something to happen, some sign that would tell us which direction our lives were supposed to go. I just never imagined that sign would come roaring into our bay with a blown transmission. The Lamborghini limped into our bay around 2:30, making sounds no car should ever make. Grinding, whining, like metal was eating itself alive under that pristine red hood. Viviana Ashworth stepped out wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, surveying my garage like she'd accidentally wandered into a construction site. "Are you the owner?" she asked, not bothering to remove those sunglasses, even though she was indoors. Her tone suggested she already regretted being here. "Rick Caldwell," I said, wiping my hands on a shop rag. "What seems to be the problem?" "The problem is this piece of Italian garbage just cost me a meeting worth $50 million, she snapped. "It started making horrible noises on the highway, then lost power completely. I barely made it here, and only because your shop was the closest thing that looked remotely competent. I popped the hood and immediately knew we were in trouble. The dual-clutch transmission in a Huracan isn't something you see every day, and from the sounds it was making, this wasn't going to be a quick fix. Ma'am, this is going to take some time to diagnose properly. Probably 3, maybe 4 days to get parts, and 4 days?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I have meetings in Los Angeles tomorrow, a board presentation Thursday, and a charity gala this weekend that's been planned for 6 months. I need this fixed today." "I understand you're in a hurry, but..." "No, you don't understand." Her voice went ice cold. "I don't have time for some backyard mechanic to fumble around with my car. This thing cost more than your little shop is worth, and I need someone who actually knows what they're doing." That's when Tegan looked up from the Honda she'd been working on. She'd been listening to the engine noise since the car pulled in, and I could see those wheels turning in her head. She walked over, oil staining her coveralls, and knelt down to get a better listen to the transmission. "It's not the clutch plates," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "That grinding is coming from the synchronizer assembly, but the power loss suggests the transmission control module might be corrupted." Viviana stared at her like she'd just started speaking ancient Greek. "Excuse me?" "Your car," Tegan said, standing up and meeting those sunglasses with steady eyes. "I think I know what's wrong with it. The previous shop that worked on it probably tried to band-aid a software calibration issue instead of fixing the underlying mechanical problem. Now both systems are failing." For a moment, Viviana was speechless. Then she started laughing, a sound sharper than the grinding transmission. "You think you can fix my Lamborghini? Impossible. You're just a kid playing in Daddy's garage. Do you have any idea what you're even looking at?" "A 2019 Huracan with a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission and approximately 47,000 miles, Tegan replied without missing a beat. "And based on the diagnostic codes your dashboard is probably showing, I'd guess the last shop that worked on it didn't properly calibrate the software after replacing components." Viviana's smile turned predatory. "Fine. You want to pretend you're a real mechanic? Let's make this interesting. If you can fix my car in 24 hours, I'll pay you triple your normal rate. $15,000. I stepped forward, knowing where this was heading. "Ma'am, that's not necessary. But when you fail," Viviana continued, ignoring me completely, "when you prove you're exactly what you look like, a little girl who doesn't belong anywhere near a car like this, you'll admit publicly that this place is a joke. You'll tell everyone that backyard mechanics shouldn't touch luxury vehicles." The garage went dead silent except for the ticking of cooling metal. I watched my daughter's face, saw something shift behind her eyes, the same look her mother used to get when someone told her she couldn't do something. "Deal," Tegan said, extending her hand. They shook on it, and I felt my stomach drop to my boots. Word would spread through town within hours. The local paper would probably want to cover it. Our reputation, our livelihood, everything I'd built in 20 years now, hung on what. The second that Lamborghini disappeared around the corner, I turned to face my daughter. She was standing there trying to look confident, but I could see her hands trembling slightly as she pulled her phone from her pocket. "Tegan, what have you done?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She'd done exactly what her mother would have done in the same situation. "I've got this, Dad," she said, but her voice had that slight shake it got whenever she was in over her head. "I know I can figure it out." That evening, after we'd closed the shop and headed home, I found Tegan at our kitchen table with her laptop open, surrounded by printed diagnostic manuals and technical bulletins she'd downloaded from automotive forums. She'd been at it for 3 hours, cross-referencing transmission schematics with software calibration procedures. "Talk to me," I said, settling into the chair across from her. "What are we really dealing with here?" She looked up with those serious eyes she'd inherited from Sarah. "It's complicated, Dad. The Huracan uses a dual clutch system that's basically 2 transmissions working together, controlled by a computer that makes split-second decisions about which clutch to engage. If the software gets corrupted, it can cause mechanical damage, and if there's mechanical damage, it can corrupt the software. So which problem came first? That's what I'm trying to figure out." She pulled up a forum thread where Lamborghini technicians were discussing similar issues. "Look at this. A guy in Phoenix had the exact same symptoms. Turns out his local dealership had tried to fix a software glitch by replacing hardware components, but they never properly recalibrated the system afterward. I watched her work, seeing the same intensity Sarah used to have when she was solving a problem. Sarah had been an accountant, could find a missing penny in a ledger with thousands of entries, and she'd always said Tegan had inherited that same methodical mind. I called Professor Martinez from school. Tegan continued. "He worked at a Lamborghini dealership before he started teaching. He's going to walk me through the calibration sequence if I need it." "And the mechanical side?" She showed me another screen, this one displaying an exploded diagram of the transmission. "I'll need to partially disassemble it to replace the synchronizer rings, but that's not the hard part. The hard part is getting the computer to accept the new components without throwing error codes that lock the whole system down." Around midnight, I found her still at that table, now with 3 empty coffee mugs and pages of notes covered in her careful handwriting. She'd always been a planner, even as a little girl. When other kids were playing with dolls, she was taking apart old radios and putting them back together, always in the right order, always making sure she understood how each piece connected to the next. "You should get some sleep," I told her. "Can't," she said without looking up. I called the parts supplier in Aurora. "They'll have the synchronizer rings ready by 6 a.m., but I need to understand the calibration sequence before I start tearing anything apart. If I mess up the timing, I could brick the entire transmission control unit." I sat down beside her and put my hand on her shoulder. "Tegan, you don't have to prove anything to that woman. We can call her in the morning, tell her we need more time." She finally looked at me, and in that moment, I saw exactly who she was becoming. Not the uncertain teenager who worried about fitting in, but the confident young woman who knew her own capabilities. "Dad, you've spent 19 years teaching me that we're not defined by what we own, but by what we can do with our hands and hearts. Tomorrow, I'm going to prove that to myself as much as to her." By dawn, she had a complete plan mapped out. Parts ordered, tools gathered, backup procedures researched. She'd even contacted 2 other technicians who'd worked on similar problems, building a network of support that stretched across 3 states. As I watched her prepare for the biggest challenge of her young life, I realized this wasn't just about fixing a car. By 8 a.m., word had spread through half of Littleton. I arrived at the shop to find Mrs. Patterson parked across the street with a thermos of coffee, and Miguel's whole crew taking their break early just to see what would happen. Then, the Channel 9 news van pulled up, and I knew we were in real trouble. Viviana arrived at exactly 9 o'clock in an Uber, wearing a different designer outfit and carrying what looked like a very expensive handbag. She'd brought friends this time, 3 other women who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine, all clearly expecting to witness our public humiliation. "Ready to admit you're in over your head?" Viviana asked as Tegan rolled the Lamborghini into position on the lift. My daughter didn't even look at her. She was already in that zone she got into when she was completely focused, the same look she'd had since she was 10 years old and rebuilding her first carburetor. "I'll let the car answer that question," she said, pulling on her work gloves. The next 4 hours were like watching a master surgeon operate. Tegan methodically removed the transmission housing, exposing the dual clutch assembly that controlled how power moved from the engine to the wheels. Every step was deliberate, photographed, labeled. She'd learned long ago that with complex repairs, you document everything because memory fails when you're putting thousands of parts back together. "The synchronizer rings are completely shot," she announced to no one in particular, holding up a component that looked like a mangled piece of metal. "And look at this." She pointed to scoring on the clutch housing. "Someone tried to fix this before but used the wrong torque specifications. That's what caused the software corruption." Around 1 o'clock, just as the crowd was getting restless, and Viviana was making snide comments about how long everything was taking, disaster struck. Tegan had reassembled the mechanical components perfectly, but when she connected the diagnostic computer to reprogram the transmission control module, the screen showed nothing but error codes. "The TCM is completely corrupted," she said, and for the first time all day I heard doubt creep into her voice. "It won't accept any commands." Viviana's friends started whispering among themselves, clearly smelling blood in the water. The Channel 9 reporter moved closer with her camera. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The moment when the small-town garage girl would finally admit she was out of her league. Instead, Tegan pulled out her phone and called Professor Martinez. Right there, in front of everyone, she put him on speaker and explained the situation. For the next 20 minutes, he walked her through a complex bypass procedure that involved connecting directly to the transmission's internal processors and manually uploading new firmware. "You're going to need to access the fail-safe mode," Professor Martinez explained through the phone's tiny speaker. "There's a sequence of inputs that tells the TCM to accept new programming even when it's corrupted, but the timing has to be perfect." I watched my daughter's face as she absorbed instructions that would challenge experienced dealership technicians. Her hands moved with absolute precision, connecting diagnostic cables and inputting commands that looked like computer code to everyone else watching. At 3:45, with 15 minutes left before the 24-hour deadline, she turned. The key. Nothing. Complete silence. My heart sank. Viviana smiled triumphantly. The reporter stepped forward with her microphone ready. Then I remembered something from 30 years of working on engines. "Check the battery connections," I said quietly. Tegan looked at me, then dove under the hood. She found it immediately, a ground cable that had vibrated loose during all the work. She tightened it with a 10mm wrench and stepped back. "Try it now." The Lamborghini purred to life with a sound like silk being torn in half. Smooth, powerful, perfect. The crowd erupted in cheers. Tegan took it for a test drive around the block, and when she returned, even I could tell the car was running better than it had in months. Viviana stood there speechless, staring at her perfectly functioning car, while the change in Viviana was immediate and startling. She walked over to where Tegan was wiping down her tools, and for a moment I thought she might still find some way to weasel out of paying what she owed. Instead, she did something that caught everyone off guard. She apologized. "I was wrong," she said, loud enough for the whole crowd to hear. "I judged you based on assumptions and stereotypes, and you proved me completely wrong." This is the best my car has ever run, and I've had it serviced at dealerships that charge me 3 times what you're asking. She pulled out her checkbook, right there in front of the Channel 9 cameras, and wrote out a check for $15,000. Then she added something I wasn't expecting. "I'm adding a $10,000 tip," she said as she handed the check to Tegan. "And I want you to have the contact information for my friends who own luxury cars. They need to know about this place." Over the next few weeks, everything changed. The news story went viral locally, then got picked up by automotive blogs nationwide. Suddenly we had customers driving in from Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, even Kansas, bringing us cars that other shops had given up on. The phone rang constantly with people wanting to know if we could fix their impossible problems. But the biggest change was in Tegan herself. The shy girl who used to second-guess herself around anyone in a suit was gone, replaced by a young woman who knew exactly what she was capable of. 3 weeks after the Lamborghini incident, she got a call from Colorado School of Mines. The dean of the engineering department had seen the news coverage and wanted to offer her something unprecedented. "They want me to start in January instead of fall," she told me over dinner that night. "Part-time student, part-time research assistant, working on a project studying advanced automotive electronics. And they're willing to let me keep working here 3 days a week." "What did you tell them?" "I told them I'd think about it," she said, but I could see the excitement in her eyes. "Dad, I don't have to choose between family and dreams anymore. I can build both. The money from that one job, plus the steady stream of high-end repairs that followed, finally put us in the black for the first time in years. We hired 2 part-time mechanics, upgraded our diagnostic equipment, and even added a small customer lounge with actual comfortable chairs. But none of that mattered as much as watching Tegan grow into the person I'd always known she could be. 6 months later, I was in the office doing paperwork when I heard a familiar purr outside. Viviana's Lamborghini pulled up, but this time she wasn't alone. She brought her friend Rebecca, whose McLaren had been having mysterious electrical problems that stumped 2 dealerships. "I only trust one shop now," I heard Viviana tell Rebecca as they walked into the bay. "The best automotive diagnostician I've ever met happens to be a 19-year-old college student who works in her father's garage." That evening, as Tegan diagnosed Rebecca's McLaren with the same methodical precision she'd shown on that first impossible day, I thought about what had really happened here. It wasn't just about proving a rich woman wrong or saving our business, though both of those things mattered. It was about watching my daughter discover that the world had been wrong about what she was worth, not the other way around. She didn't need to change to fit their expectations. She needed to show them what she'd always been. We live in a world that judges people by their bank accounts, their zip codes, their college degrees. But true worth isn't measured in any of those things. It's measured in what you can accomplish when you believe in yourself, when you refuse to let other people's limitations become your own. That day, Tegan didn't just fix a car. She fixed the part of herself that had been broken by other people's doubt. And in doing that, she showed everyone watching that sometimes